Hey, and welcome to Module 6, our final module on Descartes. That went by very quickly, didn't it?
Good old Descartes.
Yes, Descartes, let's not confuse the people. Descartes. And so in the last module, he started this process of examining how he knows his body and whether he knows his body better than his mind. And he was going through those three things he might use to know his body. And in that last module, he wrote off the senses because he found that with something like his example of wax, because the wax could alter its way and we could perceive it in two different ways through sets of senses, but we still know it's wax, that the senses must be wrong. So
not that the senses must be wrong, but that they don't communicate to us the essential fundamental information about the wax. Like, maybe we do get some information about the wax from the senses, but we can't get, Descartes' point is we can't get all of our information from the senses because everything sensory about it has changed, but we still have this understanding that it is wax. Does that make sense?
Very, very well done.
Sorry to butt in.
Misfits.
I apologise.
You always do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to look at those other two ways he thought he might know bodily things.
Yep.
The imagination and...
mental scrutes.
Cool.
So he's done with the senses now, and so he moves on to the idea of the imagination. Does he get his information about the wax through the imagination? And he sets this up in kind of a weird way, in my opinion. He tends to be a bit random from time to time, Descartes. So he's saying, maybe my understanding of the wax wasn't anything to do with the senses. It wasn't the sweetness or the fragrance or the colour or anything like that. Maybe it was purely held in my imagination. And in my imagination, well, what do I imagine the wax to be? I imagine it to be something extended, flexible, and changeable. So you need an understanding of what these three terms mean. Extended, I think, just means it has a physical existence in space.
Yep.
Flexible is like, I don't know, its shape can change, kind
Yep.
of. And changeable is just, it can change in any other way. Like maybe its colour can change and maybe its smell can change or whatever.
Cool.
But does that make sense with, the imagination? He's not really imagining the smell or the touch or the taste or anything like that. He's imagining it just to be something extended, flexible and changeable.
Okay. So, in terms of this first categorization of our imagination as seeing the wax as flexible and changeable, this is really helpfully displayed here with these different pictures. So we can imagine the wax in many different changes in terms of its shape, so being flexible, but also the kind of the colour to it and the consistency to it. But he decides that his imagination is unable to think of all the possible changes, the great number of changes that the wax could go through with just his imagination.
Yeah, I find this really cool. So you can see we've given you 4 pictorial examples here. One of them, the wax has changed into a bit of a square shape. Mm-hmm. In another one, it's more of a circular shape. Mm-hmm. In another, it is this globby shape, and in another, it's like string. Kind of. So therefore, we can imagine those changes. But surely the wax could go through an infinite number of different changes. It could be any possible shape imaginable. Mm-hmm. We can't hold all those pictures in our head, in our imagination, at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the point he's making. So similarly to how he shut down the senses, he's now shutting down imagination. So he's saying, I know that there are an infinite number of changes that this wax could go through, but my imagination is not capable of picturing every single one of those changes. So therefore, and yet I still know that the wax is capable of those changes. So therefore, it can't be through my imagination that I'm getting the information about what the wax is, fundamentally.
And it happens with that same other quality to which we imagine wax, that it can be extended in so many different ways to take up more space. And because our mind, and because we again cannot imagine all the different ways that wax could be extended, he again concludes that he's not knowing the wax through his imagination.
Yep. So, he has gotten rid of both the senses and the imagination as the methods which he uses to understand the fundamental qualities of the wax. So he therefore kind of jumps to this conclusion that because it's not the imagination or the senses, he must be understanding the wax by the mind alone. In other words, through purely mental scrutiny. So it must be just some judgment in his mind, not in his senses or his imagination, that he understands the wax to be the wax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just some weird, funky example of this judgment that we're apparently exercising through mental scrutiny. So he's saying that if we were to look out, we're in our office and we're looking out across the courtyard at school or the square, and there's a man walking across, I don't see anything more than the hats and the coats that the man is wearing. So it could secretly be concealing this automaton, which is apparently some funky old robot, according to Misfits. But I judge that they are men. So through the mental scrutiny, I'm figuring out that they are men. And look, don't laugh at me. It's Descartes' crazy idea.
No.
And so something which I thought I was seeing with my eyes, I'm grasping solely. I'm making that decision solely through my wonderful mind.
Yeah, I find this weird, but the point he's making is that he feels like he's perceiving the man through his senses, but actually he's perceiving it through mental scrutiny. He's making a mental judgment that it's a man, not an automaton.
Okay, and here we come to, well, what is the first of a number of overall conclusions in this part, but it's basically that if he thinks about when he, or considers when he most perfectly understood the wax, it was when he was using mental scrutiny, so when he was carefully investigating the wax. And so because of that, he can conclude that his mind is better at understanding things than his body. So, and by body, he means his senses or his imagination.
Yeah, so another way of putting this is his mind is a better knower than his body or his senses.
Good one, Descartes.
So not only does Descartes think that this leads him to the conclusion that his mind is better at knowing things than his body, it also leads him to the conclusion that he has better understanding of his mind than of his body. And I think the reason for this is that Descartes believes that he knows that his mind exists, I guess, and can understand things, but he doesn't know that his body exists and can understand things. He doesn't know that any of the information he gets through his body, in other words his senses, is actually real. So surely that means that he has better understanding of his mind, because at least he knows something about his mind, whereas he knows nothing about his body. And this leads him to his ultimate conclusion in this second meditation, the third conclusion, which is that his mind and his body are two separate things. Now, we know Descartes is a famous dualist. This is where he first makes his point about dualism. Now, Mr. Warwick and I were discussing this earlier, and we think that Descartes is making a bit of a big leap here.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to make this point by saying there are differences between my mind and my body.
Okay.
So my mind is a better knower.
Yeah.
And also I know my mind better.
Yeah.
And due to those differences, they must therefore be different things and separate things, which you might have your own thoughts on that. Is that a valid argument? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that just having differences means that they must be completely separate.
Yeah.
You know?
Or possibly there's just more to it, that it's too simple, that there's more. What is that connection or something?
What connection?
Between the mind and the body, between the two.
Oh,
separate
okay.
things, that there might be some
Oh, so they might be
overlap or
different but
connection.
connected
Yeah,
rather than different and completely separate.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's for your evaluation, which we'll discuss in class, but hopefully you now have an understanding of Descartes' 3 conclusions. Just what were the 3 conclusions?
I think, therefore I exist.
Yeah, I exist.
Yeah, I exist.
I'm
I'm a
a-
thinking thing, and now that the mind and body are 2 separate things.
Nice.
It's
Good
quite
old
a
Descartes.
ramp up there, though. Like, it's a big, like, nice small conclusions. Then all of a sudden, it's like mind and body are 2 separate things.
Yeah, I agree. I think the wax argument is pretty dramatic kind of argument that makes a few leaps
Yeah.
of logic.
Yeah. Cool.
Have fun.